There are moments in life that don't announce themselves with thunder. They arrive quietly, like a misplaced breath, a half-opened door, or a smile that doesn't belong to you. And yet, they split your world in two. For me, it happened on an evening so ordinary I still struggle to believe what it carried in its silence. I had left work early that day, no reason, no warning. Just a strange heaviness, a heaviness in my chest, the kind that tells you something is waiting for you on the other side of your own front door. I've learned that the body sometimes knows the truth long before the mind is ready to accept it. My neighborhood looked calm as I pulled into the driveway. Children's bicycles were scattered along the sidewalk. It got sprinklers ticked rhythmically across suburban lawns. Nothing about that scene hinted that my marriage was already on its knees. Inside the house, everything was still, too still. My footsteps echoed in a way they hadn't before, as though the walls were holding their breath. I called out for Emily, a soft, casual greeting, but the sound swallowed itself, unanswered, disappearing into the hall. Then I heard it, a laugh not loud, not wild. A soft, breathy sound carried through the open sliding door that led to the backyard. Her laugh. But not the one she gave me, not anymore. Marriage changes the music between two people. In our early years, her laugh used to dance along the walls, light, unrestrained. Over the past few months, though, it had grown quieter, heavier, something she seemed to guard instead of share. But the laugh drifting into the house now was full, warm, familiar in a way I hadn't heard in a long, long time. Yokana, a sound reserved for someone who wasn't me. I moved toward the sliding door without meaning to, pulled by instinct, dread tightening in my stomach. The blinds were half drawn, leaving narrow spaces of visibility, thin slices of truth I wasn't sure I wanted to see. Yet there she was, Emily, my wife, sitting at the patio table, sunlight brushing her hair, making it shimmer the way it used to when she'd fall asleep in my arms on summer afternoons. Her shoulders were relaxed, her posture soft, an ease she hadn't shown in our home for months. She leaned slightly forward, eyes warm, lips parted in a gentle smile that tugged at something inside me. A smile I had missed, a smile I didn't know she still had, and sitting across from her was a man. Broad-shouldered, confident posture, his hand rested near hers, close enough to touch, yet careful, as if savoring the tension. And I couldn't see his face at first, only the outline of someone who didn't belong in my backyard, yet seemed to fit perfectly inside the world my wife was building beside him. The two of them talked quietly, but their expressions said more than words ever could. Emily tucked a strand of hair behind her ear, a move she used to do when she felt nervous or excited. The man smiled at her in a way that told me their familiarity wasn't new. It wasn't accidental. It wasn't innocent. It had history. My heart didn't break. People always describe heartbreak as shattering, cracking, collapsing. Mine froze, stopped, held itself perfectly still so the truth could settle into every part of me. I stood there longer than a faithful man should, longer than a betrayed one usually does, but I didn't move. It didn't storm outside, didn't shout or demand answers. Instead, I watched, not as a husband, but as an outsider in my own life. The man leaned closer. Emily's eyes softened. Something in her expression, something intimate, something unguarded confirmed what my instincts had whispered for weeks. Whatever was happening between them. It didn't start today. My breath left my lungs in one controlled exhale. And with that breath, something inside me shifted. I stepped back from the blinds, walked quietly through the kitchen. Moved with the precision of someone dismantling a bomb no one else could see. I slipped out the side door of the house and sat in my car, my hands resting on the steering wheel. Not shaking, not trembling, just steady, a dangerous kind of steady. That's when I understood something few people ever realize at the moment of betrayal. The end of a marriage doesn't always begin with shouting. Sometimes it begins with silence, a silence that crawls beneath your ribs and lights a fire that burns without smoke. As I drove away from my own home, a single thought shaped itself with unsettling clarity. She didn't just smile at him. She smiled at him the way she used to smile at me. And that was the moment I stopped being her husband and started becoming the man she never expected me to be. If betrayal has a voice, it doesn't sound like rage. It sounds like recognition, like a name you never expected to hear again, whispered in the wrong context, tied to the worst possible truth. For 2 days after seeing Emily in the backyard, Hatstranaded Sekanation Amatapirklushan. I lived in a world suspended between two versions of reality, the one where my marriage was intact, and the one I watched crumble through the blinds. Both realities walked beside me, both demanded to be believed, but only one left a shadow. I didn't confront her. Not yet. There is a strange power in silence, an unspoken permission to observe the world as it truly is, main tamapai, uninterrupted by excuses, lies, or rehearsed emotions. I carried that silence with me like a second skin. It followed me into our bedroom, followed me down the hall, followed me to work, and all the while, Emily behaved as though nothing had happened. She moved through our home with the same careful grace she always had. Except now I was looking through a different lens. The way she lingered on her phone, the way she exhaled before texting, as though choosing the perfect words, the way she smiled, but never toward me. And so I kept watching, not because I needed more proof, but because a man planning revenge doesn't move on instinct. He gathers information piece by piece, truth by truth, lie by lie. On the third morning after the backyard discovery, I casually asked Emily what she had done that afternoon. Yeah, she didn't blink. "Oh, I just worked on the garden a little," she said, sipping her coffee. "You know how the tulips are late this year, tulips." Funny how she remembered the flowers but not the man sitting across from her. I nodded, pretending to care, pretending to believe, pretending to be the same husband I was before the world tilted but something inside me had shifted so far beyond repair. That it felt like I was watching her from behind glass. She didn't notice, and that alone told me how far gone she really was. Every revenge story begins with a thread, a small loose end waiting to be pulled. Mine came in the form of a name I hadn't thought about in years. That afternoon, while Emily took a shower, her phone lit up on the nightstand, a brief flash, a notification. Derek made it home yet? Derek? At first the name didn't register. It felt ordinary, like any other name a coworker, neighbor, or harmless acquaintance might send, but something nudged me. A corner of memory, a whisper from the past. I didn't touch her phone, not yet. Instead, I stepped out of the room and took a breath deep enough to steady the anger that threatened to rise. Derek. Derek. The name rolled through my mind like a slow-moving storm. Where had I heard it? Where had it mattered? Hey, Kale. Emily stepped out of the bathroom minutes later, wrapped in a towel, humming as though the universe had never betrayed me. She didn't realize her phone still glowed on the nightstand. But I realized something else. She had saved him under his real name. That meant familiarity. That meant history. That meant danger. Certain memories hide behind dust, tucked away in corners of the past you forget to clean. But sometimes all it takes is one name, just one, to make those memories stand upright again. After Emily left for work, I stood in the hallway staring at a framed photograph I hadn't looked at in years. It was taken during a camping trip long before marriage became a battlefield. 4 of us stood in the picture. Me. Emily, my college roommate Tyler, and a man with a quiet smile and sharp eyes, Derek Miles, a friend I once trusted. A friend who vanished from my life abruptly. After one strange night he never explained. I felt my stomach tighten. Derek wasn't a stranger. He wasn't some recent acquaintance Emily had stumbled into. He was someone who knew me, knew my life, knew my habits, knew my routines, knew my weaknesses. A friend who once walked through the private spaces of my world and now sat in the backyard with my wife. A cold truth settled into me like winter creeping under a door. This wasn't random. Cheating never is. It's a pattern, a timeline, a map of decisions people think they can hide, but every affair leaves footprints. And I had just found my first one that evening. After Emily went to bed early, too early, I sat in the living room replaying the memories I had buried. The camping trip, the nights the 4 of us spent talking around bonfires. The way Derek always made Emily laugh a little louder than the rest of us. Back then I chalked it up to friendship. We were all young. We were all naive. But the night Derek disappeared from my life came back to me with painful clarity. The last evening of that trip. He had pulled me aside while Emily and Tyler collected firewood, his face serious, his voice low. "Nate, if you're not careful, someone's going to take her from you." I laughed it off. He didn't. "That's not a joke," he said. "Emily loves me," I replied, confident and clueless. He studied me for a long moment, then shook his head. "That's not what I meant." The next morning, he left early without saying goodbye. We didn't talk after that. Life moved on. I convinced myself it was nothing. Now I understood he hadn't disappeared. He had been waiting for the cracks, waiting for the distance, waiting for the moment Emily stopped calling me hers. And I, like a fool, had handed him the opportunity years ago at joelcistp.m. While Emily slept beside me, her phone buzzed on the nightstand. This time I read it. "Derek, miss you already." Today felt good. A simple message, a simple sentence, but simplicity is the sharpest kind of wound. I didn't respond, didn't type, didn't touch a thing. I simply memorized the words. Then something else happened, something small but devastatingly revealing. Emily shifted in her sleep, smiling, smiling. My wife hadn't smiled like that at me in months, maybe years. But Derek could pull one from her even in unconsciousness. The truth carved itself deeper. She wasn't halfway gone. She wasn't confused. She was his, fully, emotionally, physically, secretly. But secrets don't stay hidden when a man like me decides to uncover them. The next morning, I watched her get ready, hair straightened, subtle perfume, a blouse she hadn't worn in years. Meeting today, I asked, my tone calm, unreadable. Just work, she said, without meeting my eyes. Just work. Work. Just, I let the lie slide across the room like a glass ornament I didn't feel like catching. And when she left, I opened my laptop and began what would become the first documented step of my revenge. I searched Derek Miles. Nothing at first, too common of a name. Then I found him on a business networking site. An older photo, but unmistakably him, real estate acquisitions, local, active, connected. Yeah, a man who shook hands with politicians, a man who attended charity events, a man who smiled with confidence. Yeah, a man whose career depended on reputation, and reputation is the easiest thing in the world to destroy. But not yet. Revenge isn't fire, it isn't rage, it isn't even hatred, it's patience sharpened into a weapon. Yeah, I kept searching, built a quiet profile of Derek's life, and then something else surfaced. A detail that changed the entire trajectory of what I was about to do. Derek hadn't been single these past years. He had been engaged, until last winter when his fiancée abruptly called it off. No explanation, no public reason, just gone. I sat back in my chair. A man doesn't lose a fiancée without leaving a wound behind. A wound someone might be willing to talk about, and so another thread appeared, thin but strong enough to pull. Her name was Claire. I found her through a friend of a friend's social media trail, and she was Derek's ex-fiancée. And from the surface, she seemed calm, composed, the kind of woman who left quietly instead of loudly. But calm doesn't mean harmless. Sometimes the quietest people carry the deepest truths. I crafted a simple, respectful message, neutral, polite, but deliberately vague. Hi, Claire. We don't know each other, but I believe we may have a shared concern involving Derek Miles. If you're open to talking, I'd appreciate a moment of your time. The message sat unread for hours. Then suddenly, then nothing. I waited steady in my silence. Finally, after what felt like the longest 5 minutes of my life, she replied, if this has to do with why I left him, I already know part of the truth. My heartbeat stumbled. She followed with a second message. You must be Nathan, Emily's husband. I went cold. She knew me. She knew Emily. She knew Derek's pattern, and she wasn't surprised, not even remotely. Another message came. I've been waiting for you to reach out. Waiting, not hoping, not expecting, waiting. A dark realization settled into me. I wasn't the first man Derek had targeted. I was simply the latest one who hadn't yet learned the full story. And that evening, while Emily pretended to be working late, I sat in my car parked behind a deserted lot, phone pressed to my ear, listening to a woman unravel the truth I had never imagined. Claire's voice was calm, but there was a hollow ache in it, an ache I instantly recognized. Derek doesn't fall in love, she said softly. He hunts. The word chilled me. He finds vulnerable marriages. He gets close, pretends to empathize, and then positions himself as the better option. He did it before me. And he did it after I asked, meaning he had a history even beyond her. Yes, she replied. Emily is the fourth, not second, not third, fourth. He has a pattern, she continued. He always chooses women who are emotionally drifting, ones who confide in him, ones who feel unseen. Hi, guy. He studies their marriages, and he uses everything he learns to pull them away. My grip tightened on the steering wheel. And the husbands? I asked. Her voice darkened. He destroys them, she whispered. Sometimes financially, sometimes socially, sometimes emotionally. Derek once told me he doesn't just want the woman. He wants the man to feel replaced. Replaced. Yeah, that word carved itself into my bones. Claire took a shaky breath. When I left him, it was because I realized he wasn't pursuing me. He was competing with my husband, and he wanted to win. My blood went cold. En han forsesken blid brien Saraspasa Bashan first applicev to drills and entrance separtation. And now, she said quietly, He's using Emily to get to you. I swallowed hard. Why me? Can Dural Fasher someone try to Paisaman Derek? You'll have to ask him that, she said. But Nathan, whatever you do, don't confront them yet. Derek is dangerous when cornered, dangerous. The word lingered, not dramatic, not exaggerated, but factual, mesmerid, true. The call ended with a final warning. Get proof, get everything, and don't let him know, you know. Okay, I locked my phone, the screen going black, reflecting a version of myself I didn't entirely recognize, a man steady as stone. A man carved by truth, a man preparing for war. When I returned home, Emily was sitting on the couch, scrolling through her phone, pretending she hadn't spent the evening somewhere else. She looked up, offering me a quick, empty smile. You're back early. Did she hear herself? Did she realize how far she had drifted? I simply nodded and walked past her. In the bedroom, I stood in the dark for a long, heavy moment, then I made a decision. Revenge wasn't just about exposing an affair, it was about dismantling the man who preyed on my wife. The man who stole pieces of my life long before I knew it. The man who once warned me someone might take her away, knowing all along he intended to be that someone. My marriage wasn't destroyed spontaneously, it was orchestrated, calculated, engineered, and now I was going to return the favor with precision Derek couldn't dream of matching. I opened my laptop, created a hidden folder, and began to collect everything, send shots, photos, names, timelines, Claire's testimony. Derek's patterns, Emily's lies, a quiet archive of truth, a truth that would eventually burn everything Derek touched. But not yet. Not until he believed he had already won. That is the only way revenge truly satisfies. Not when your enemy is strong, but when he is certain he cannot lose. 3 nights later, I saw Derek again, not in my backyard, not next to my wife, but in the reflection of a restaurant window as I walked past on my way home. He was standing inside, speaking to a group of men, laughing, shaking hands, radiating confidence. A man who thought he owned the room, a man who believed he held every advantage. He didn't see me, but I saw everything, his gestures, his demeanor, his hunger for influence, his intoxicating arrogance. I realized then why he had chosen Emily. He didn't want her. He wanted what taking her represented. A victory. A conquest, a message. He didn't just know my life, he had studied it, besmirched it, targeted it, and, in doing so, he had made one fatal mistake. He underestimated the man he betrayed. I stood outside the restaurant until Derek walked away from the window. Until his silhouette disappeared into the noise of the city, until I could breathe without my chest tightening. Then I whispered a quiet promise into the cold night air. Yeah, you wanted my life, Derek. You're about to lose yours. Revenge begins long before the first move is made. It begins in the moment a man sees the truth clearly and decides he will not forgive it. And that was the night I stopped being the victim of his game. I was no longer the husband who watched from behind the blinds. I was the man preparing to rewrite the ending. And Derek Miles had no idea that the real hunt had just begun. There are nights you remember because they were beautiful. And then there are nights you remember because they broke something in you that can never be repaired. The night I discovered the true end of my marriage didn't begin with shouting or suspicion. It began with a mistake, one small misplacement, one oversight, one crack in the careful world my wife thought she had constructed. A phone in the wrong place at the wrong time, and a truth too big to remain hidden. That night, the universe didn't whisper, it screamed. It was late, close to midnight, when Emily finally drifted into a restless sleep beside me. She had been on edge all evening. I could see it in the way she checked her phone when she thought I wasn't looking, in the way she avoided eye contact, in the way her breathing changed every time a notification buzzed. She didn't know I had turned off the vibration mode on her phone the previous morning, a simple adjustment, and barely noticeable. But now every message lit up her screen with a soft glow that illuminated the dark bedroom. At star.ea.m, her phone lit up again, then again, then again, 3 messages in rapid succession. She didn't stir, but I did. I reached over, not to unlock the phone because I didn't need to. What I needed was already written across the screen in bold white text. Derek, you home safe? I wanted more time. Delete this, that last sentence, delete this. That was the moment I knew this wasn't just infidelity. This was strategy, coordination, a routine practiced and perfected over time. You only remind someone to delete something if the habit already exists. My chest tightened, not with panic, but with something colder, a slow-burning clarity. Emily shifted slightly, exhaling softly, unaware that her secret world had slipped through her fingers. My eyes stayed on the phone, the messages stopped, but my heartbeat did not. I didn't sleep. Not even for a minute. Around 3 in the morning, Emily turned in her sleep and settled on her side, facing away from me. I slipped out of bed quietly, my feet memorizing the path through the darkness. The house felt different at night, not just silent, empty. As if it had already registered that I was walking among ghosts, ghosts of vows, promises, shared dreams. And when I reached the living room, I noticed something on the couch, a shape under a blanket, small, rectangular, Emily's purse. And sticking halfway out of it, another phone, not the one I had seen earlier. Okay, this one was older, thinner, with light scratches near the charging port, a second phone. Everything inside me went still. And I didn't touch it at first. I simply stared, the truth settling like a stone in my stomach. People don't hide second phones because they're bored or curious. They hide them because one life isn't enough for what they're doing. When I finally reached for it, the device felt warm under my fingers, as though it had been used recently. And the screen lit up, no password, her mistake, her undoing. Okay, when the phone unlocked, the first thing I saw was the message icon, 27 unread messages, all from Derek. My thumb hovered over the icon, not trembling, not hesitant, just steady with purpose. Okay. When I opened the message thread, the world I thought I lived in dissolved into dust. There were messages from that same day, from the day before, from last week, then months, then years. Not everything was explicit. They were careful, coded. Okay. But betrayal has a tone, an energy, a rhythm. And this rhythm had been beating behind my back for far longer than I dared imagine. I started reading Derek, you from Mel. I started reading Derek. Oh, he left early today. Can't risk seeing you, Emily. Oh, I'll tell him I'm running errands. Derek, did he buy it? Emily, of course he did. He always does. A slow, suffocating pressure wrapped itself around my ribs, but I kept reading. Emily, he asked if I'm okay. Sometimes I think he can sense it. Derek, then be careful. He's smarter than you think. Smarter than she thought. Just not smart enough to stop it earlier. Message after message, night after night, month after month, the timeline of their affair stretched far beyond the innocent picture I had painted in my suffering mind. Again, this wasn't new. This wasn't new. This wasn't recent. This wasn't a marriage falling apart. Okay, this was a marriage that had been dead in her heart long before I ever noticed its coldness. The messages from 4 months ago were the worst. The day she told me she was staying late at work. The day I had made her dinner and she never touched it. Bycraft. The day she came home smelling faintly of cologne, she claimed, was from a coworker who hugged her goodbye at a meeting. That night had been the night she and Derek crossed a line they could never uncross. The evidence sat right there on the screen. Derek, tonight's the night, Emily. Yes. Stop asking, Derek. I want you. Q, Emily, I know Derek, I'll be waiting. The messages stopped for several hours after that, then resumed. Derek, you home? Emily, just walked in. He's asleep. Derek, how was it? A pause, a longer pause, and then her answer, Emily, better than anything I've felt in years. The phone nearly slipped from my hand. Okay, I didn't breathe for several seconds, not because of the physical act described, not because of the betrayal itself, but because of how casually she had written it, how easily, how freely, how confidently, as though my heart were a small, disposable object she no longer found necessary. I scrolled further, and that's when I saw messages that turned everything from betrayal to danger. Their affair wasn't just emotional. It wasn't just physical. It had strategy, it had direction, it had a future where I did not exist. Not through murder, no, they weren't that reckless, but through removal, slow, calculated, clean, Emily. He's been distant lately. Derek, good, let him drift. Emily, if he gets suspicious, Derek, then we push him out emotionally, one step at a time, a plan of erasure, a slow removal of me from my own marriage, not sudden, not violent, just gradual abandonment, like a man slowly sinking into the ground, while the people closest to him watch without offering a hand. Then came another message. Emily, I feel guilty sometimes. Derek, you don't mount. He's strong. He'll survive. He always does. My fists clenched around the device, so she knew. She knew this was killing me long before I had ever seen the truth. Okay, they weren't worried about me discovering it. They were worried about how efficiently they could replace me. Okay, the man who once spent nights by my side at college bonfires, the man whose jokes I tolerated, like, the man who celebrated my engagement. He wasn't stealing my wife. My wife had willingly handed me over. Okay, there are things the human mind isn't meant to see, things that once seen cannot be unseen. Okay, I opened the photo gallery, not because I wanted to, okay, but because a man needs to understand the scale of his ruin before rebuilding begins. There were pictures, dozens. Photos from hotel rooms, car interiors, restaurants I paid for when she said she was having lunch with clients, selfies, Keck smiles, hands intertwined, pictures of Emily wearing outfits she never wore around me anymore. Pictures taken on days she had told me she was sick. Pictures of the two of them on our anniversary. Pictures from a weekend getaway she had claimed was a work retreat. And pictures that mapped a double life she had been living while I slept beside her every night. I didn't delete them. And I didn't throw the phone across the room. I didn't shout. Instead, I memorized the dates, the timestamps, the locations, not because I needed them for grief, but because I needed them for revenge. There was one unheard voicemail. From 2 weeks ago. At first, I wasn't going to listen. I had already seen enough. But fate has a way of ensuring the truth isn't walked away from so easily. I pressed play. And Emily's voice filled the room. Soft, hushed, rushed, Derek. I can't talk long. He's in the shower. I think we're there either sloppish and unbearers. I think we're getting sloppy. He's different lately, watching me more. I don't think he knows anything yet, but just be careful. We can't let him figure out we started this before the counseling. If he finds out how long it's been, everything falls apart. There it was, Tepernation. They had been together long before the counseling, before the fights, before the distance, before she said she was emotionally confused, before she claimed we needed space, before I blamed myself. The voicemail continued. I'll handle him emotionally. Just give me time. He trusts me more than he trusts himself. Once he lets go, everything gets easier. A soft laugh, not guilt, not hesitation, excitement. I'll see you tomorrow. The message ended. Silence filled the room, deep, suffocating silence that pressed against the walls like the whole house was holding its breath. There are two versions of betrayal, the one that hurts you and the one that changes you. This was the second kind. I sat on the couch for what felt like an hour, not moving, not breathing evenly, just absorbing the timeline of their affair, the depth of their deception, the planning behind my back, the lies, the manipulation, the emotional erosion they crafted like architects. Some men crumble under that kind of truth. Some lash out, some break down, some drown in alcohol or anger or hopelessness, but I didn't break. I sharpened. The pain didn't disappear. It evolved, turned into focus, turned into precision, turned into purpose. They wanted me gone quietly, but I didn't intend to disappear. I intended to rise, not with violence, not with chaos, but with intention, with calculation, with patience, with the quiet, devastating clarity of a man who has nothing left to lose and everything left to reclaim. Before going back to bed, I placed the phone exactly where I found it, not a millimeter off. I walked into the bedroom. Emily lay there peacefully, wrapped in dreams that didn't include me. Her breathing even, her lips faintly curved. She didn't wake, didn't sense the shift in the air. She still believed she was in control. She still believed her world was hidden. She still believed I was blind. But ignorance is a temporary shield, and dawn always comes for the deceivers. As I lay beside her, staring at the ceiling, one truth crystallized with unstoppable certainty. My marriage hadn't ended tonight. It had ended months ago. Tonight, I simply found the obituary. There's a strange kind of power in being unnoticed. Most people fear it. Fear fading into the background, fear losing significance, fear becoming a shadow in their own life. But for me, invisibility became a shield, and then, slowly, a weapon. The moment I realized Claire didn't look at me anymore. Not really, not with recognition or warmth or the smallest spark of interest. I stopped fighting for her attention. I stopped trying to win a heart that had walked out long before its body did instead. I learned how to live in the quiet edges of her vision. And from there, I studied her. The first lesson a betrayed man learns is that the truth never arrives politely. It barges in, shattering the world you thought was yours. The second lesson is darker. Once you've seen the truth, you can never unsee it. And once you accept it, you can use it. That night, the night Claire walked past me at the bottom of the stairs without even noticing the coffee mug in my hand, without noticing the silence I reserved just for her, I realized she already considered me gone. My presence to her was a technicality, my absence emotionally a relief. And so, I slipped into the role she unknowingly assigned me, a ghost in my own home, watching every living thing inside it. At first, I let the routine continue as if nothing had cracked beneath the surface. Each morning, Claire rushed through the kitchen, grabbing her tote bag and disappearing with the same rehearsed smile, the one that used to warm me, but now only confirmed the depth of her performance. I started paying attention to the details she didn't bother to hide anymore. She woke earlier than usual, and she wore makeup she hadn't touched in years. She checked her phone before saying good morning. Check. She hummed when she thought I wasn't listening. These weren't the habits of a guilty woman. These were the habits of a woman already living a second life. I kept my replies soft, steady, predictable. Predictability was essential. Predictability tells the cheater that their world is safe and unchallenged. Predictability stops them from noticing your footsteps in the dark. During the evenings, she came home with the hollow exhaustion of someone juggling lies. She'd offer a peck on my cheek, barely a breath, barely contact, and walk straight to the shower. She lingered long under the water. Sometimes I heard her laugh in there, laughing into the steam, laughing at text messages she answered with fast-tapping fingers. The woman I married used to rush to tell me every silly, joyful thing that made her day lighter. Now she guarded her joy as if joy itself were evidence, but I didn't confront her. Confrontation gives the enemy a timeline. I needed her to stay blind to mine. Silence has a gravity to it. Like if you sit in it long enough, you can feel the weight of other people's secrets pressing through the walls. I learned Claire's new routines the way a hunter studies the footsteps of an animal, quietly, patiently without disturbing the trail. I memorized the rhythm of her phone as it buzzed across the counter. I memorized the names she pretended not to react to. I memorized the way her breathing changed when she whispered in the hallway late at night, telling someone she couldn't talk right now. I memorized her lies. I watched them accumulate like dust, light, harmless, almost invisible, until you shine a beam across the room and see the storm swirling in front of your eyes. I kept my beam off. For now, the hardest part wasn't the silence, it was the restraint. There were nights when my entire body begged to shout, to haul every accusation onto the table, to demand answers, to tear apart the fragile fantasy she believed she controlled. But every time the temptation rose, I remembered the stranger in my house, the one who seemed to know me, the one who hinted at truths buried deeper than infidelity, and I remembered the lesson his presence carved into my spine. If you want justice, you cannot take the first swing. Because justice taken too early becomes revenge wasted. So instead of shouting, I listened. Instead of asking, I observed. Instead of breaking, I bent, and slowly bending became a form of strength. One evening, Claire came home distracted, so distracted she forgot to hide the truth. She tossed her phone on the couch, and it lit up with a message before she could snatch it back. Not a name, just an initial. Kanked. A single letter glowing in the dim room like a threat I wasn't supposed to see. See, not for Claire. For someone else entirely. She froze when she realized the phone had chimed out in the open. Her eyes flicked to me, gauging my reaction, but I was already trained for this moment. My face showed nothing. Not curiosity, not suspicion, not pain, just calm, and that calm unnerved her more than any fight ever could. She grabbed the phone so quickly she nearly dropped it. Work, she said, too fast, just work stuff. I nodded. She waited for a question. I didn't give her one. And in that moment, I watched the first flicker of fear cross her face. Not guilt, fear. Fear that I wasn't the predictable husband she believed me to be. Fear that maybe I had seen something she didn't want exposed. Fear that maybe I didn't intend to stay invisible. She studied me for a long second, longer than she had looked up at me in months, trying to read what wasn't there. And then she disappeared upstairs, her footsteps sharp, tense, nervous, and I realized something powerful. Indifference is the most unsettling mask a betrayed partner can wear. It tells the offender, I know more than you think. It tells them, I'm not asking because I don't need your story. It tells them whatever you're hiding will eventually walk into the light, and Claire started to unravel, and over the next week, she avoided eye contact more than usual. She changed her phone password. She kept her tote bag zipped at all times. She cleared browser history twice a day. She watered the plants at midnight, though we didn't have enough plants to justify the ritual. Cheaters become the architects of their own paranoia. I didn't lift a finger, I didn't snoop, I didn't confront. I didn't accuse. I simply lived, quietly, presently, unshackably, and in that presence she became smaller. Guilt is a shrinking disease. It curls a person inward until all that's left is a twitching shadow of who they used to be. But guilt wasn't enough, not for what she'd done, not for what she was still doing. My revenge needed something deeper, something more intelligent, something permanent. And for that, I had to stop acting like the version of Aaron she had grown bored of and start becoming someone she couldn't predict. The transformation began in small, invisible ways. I reorganized my schedule. I stopped waiting at home. I found excuses to be out, silent but unmistakably active. I changed passwords on accounts she never bothered to check. I began taking calls in other rooms, calls that didn't matter but sounded like they might. Getcher. Every detail was designed with precision. I needed her to wonder. I needed her to spiral. I needed her to feel what she had forced me to feel. Most people think revenge is loud, explosive, dramatic, theatrical, but the most effective revenge is quiet. Quiet enough that the target never hears it coming. The night Claire broke was subtle. She stood in the doorway of our bedroom, watching me fold laundry, a mundane chore, harmless, routine. Her hands were trembling so slightly I almost missed it. "Are we okay?" she asked. The question itself told me everything I needed to know. Cheaters don't ask if you're okay, and they ask if you know. I looked up, letting my expression stay soft, unreadable. Why wouldn't we be? It wasn't a trap. It was an invitation for her to lie, for her to dig herself deeper, for her to show me how scared she had become of the quiet man she once ignored. She blinked, confused, caught between guilt and fear. "No reason, you've just been distant, like the cheater's favorite projection." I almost laughed, but instead I simply nodded. "Long week. That's all." And with that one calm answer, I broke something inside her. Verdakten sentakent ondendazen tentenmaschen. The way her shoulders sagged, the way her breath shook. She wanted a fight. Fights feel safe. Fights mean the person still cares. Fights mean the relationship is alive, but I didn't give her that luxury. I let her sit in the silent uncertainty she created. She left the room on unsteady legs, and I felt a dark satisfaction settle in my chest. Not joy, not triumph, something colder, more controlled, more calculated. The same feeling a surgeon gets before making the first incision, because revenge is surgery, not murder. It requires delicacy, and patience, and knowledge of every nerve you intend to sever. The most dangerous part came next, not the planning, not the waiting, but the transformation. I had to reshape myself from the inside out, not for her, but for the justice I intended to deliver. I stopped reacting, stopped explaining myself, stopped giving her the emotional signals she relied on to read the marriage. I became neutral, unreachable, Ropakalf. There is nothing more unsettling to a deceptive partner than losing access to the person they thought they controlled. And Claire began to unravel faster. The nights grew longer. Her whispers in the hallway turned frantic. Her showers lasted 40 minutes. Her dishes piled up because she couldn't focus long enough to wash them. Yet paranoia ate away the confidence of the woman who once deceived me with such ease. And all I had to do was exist quietly, coldly, consistently. Because the truth is this, revenge begins long before the final strike. It begins the moment the betrayer realizes they've underestimated the one they wronged. It begins when your silence becomes louder than their excuses. It begins when they look at you and see someone they no longer recognize, someone stronger, someone calmer, someone dangerous. By the end of that week, Claire avoided me entirely, not out of anger, but out of fear that her carefully constructed world was collapsing. She was right, because I no longer moved like the husband she betrayed. I moved like the man she should have never underestimated, and soon, very soon, she would understand what kind of man that truly was. The quietest traps are the deadliest. Not the ones with sharp metal jaws or snapping teeth, but the ones woven from silence, patience, and the steady hand of someone who's already lost everything. Those traps don't announce themselves. They don't glitter. They don't tremble. They sit there, invisible, waiting for the perfect moment to tighten. Mine began on a Wednesday afternoon. It was the kind of day that pretends to be harmless. A soft sky, a warm breeze, a neighborhood going about its business. But on the inside, everything was shifting. I could feel it the moment Claire walked through the door. She was nervous, too nervous, the kind of nervous that makes someone accidentally reveal the things they're trying hardest to hide. And she set her bag down carefully, too carefully, the way someone places a box filled with secrets that might spill if jostled. Her eyes darted toward me just long enough to confirm I was still playing the part of the quiet, predictable husband, and I was better than ever. But what she didn't know was simple. By the time a cheater begins hiding, The betrayed partner has already seen the truth, and by the time guilt begins whispering, the betrayed partner has already started planning. Okay, that day, Claire moved through the house like she was walking across thin ice. She didn't know it, but the ice had already cracked weeks ago, the night the stranger appeared in my home, the night my world split into what I thought I knew, and what was really happening. En se knapper naptrenestavent pieces not lettersematics. Since then, I'd begun collecting pieces, not evidence, not proof, pieces of behavior, pieces of routine, pieces of the lies she told without blinking. And a trap built from pieces is stronger than one built from force. Okay, I started with the smallest move. I fixed the squeak in the hallway floor. It had bothered her for months. She used to grumble every time she stepped over that particular board. But recently, she had stopped complaining because it no longer bothered her. It warned her every night around EAM. She'd slink down the hallway toward the guest bathroom, phone in hand, whispering into the screen. The squeak had become her lookout, a tiny alarm system that told her if I was awake, if I was walking toward her, if I was close enough to hear the conversations she took pains to hide. Okay, so I fixed it, not loudly, not noticeably. One screw, one shim, one drop of wood glue. 5 minutes of work. The next night she slipped out of bed, padded down the hallway, and froze mid-step. When the floor remained silent beneath her weight, she panicked. I could feel it from across the house, the small hitch in her breath, the way her footsteps turned hesitant, the way she checked over her shoulder twice instead of once. A predictable woman becomes unpredictable once her environment changes without explanation, and uncertainty is the beginning of unraveling. The second part of the trap came naturally. I stopped reacting to anything, and when her phone buzzed, my eyes didn't flinch. And when she typed furiously in the bathroom, I didn't shift in bed. When she came home smelling faintly of a cologne I didn't own, I didn't stare too long. Indifference is a kind of mirror. It reflects the liar back to themselves, magnified, and Claire began watching me more than ever, searching for cracks in the facade she assumed was there. But I had become the version of myself she never expected, calm, observant, and untouchably steady. It terrified her. She started leaving small crumbs of affection in my path, a longer smile, a softer tone, a hand brushed against my shoulder. Not because she loved me, but because she feared I knew something she couldn't name. I didn't respond. And I didn't reciprocate. I didn't punish her with coldness. That would have been too obvious. No, I gave her something far more dangerous, neutrality. Neutrality tells a guilty person that the reckoning hasn't arrived yet. And that uncertainty gnaws the loudest in the dark. 3 days later, I installed the final piece of the trap: access, not to her phone, not to her emails, not to her private messages, to her world. You learn more about a person by watching the spaces they move through than by reading the words they send. People can lie in their messages, but they cannot lie in their habits. I started small, a shared calendar we had stopped using years ago. I revived it under the guise of getting more organized. An innocent marital gesture, one most spouses would welcome. Claire added her work events, and spas en pundren prenam first and tom tunneres. Claire added her work events, her meetings, her late shifts, but she only added the lies, never the real truths. That was exactly what I needed. A liar's lies outline the shape of the truth they're trying to hide. Her calendar became a map of where she was pretending to be, which told me where she actually was. If she marked a work meeting, she was elsewhere. If she marked a late shift, she was already planning to disappear long before sunset. And if she marked gym, a place she hadn't set foot in since before our wedding, then she was meeting someone who could make her glow in a way sweat could not. But I never followed her. A trap is not sprung by chasing the prey. A trap closes when the prey walks right into the center of it on its own. T.S. and Gwints. One night, after marking yet another fake team meeting, Claire rushed out of the house in a red blouse she hadn't worn in years. It used to be her favorite. I remembered the day she bought it, the way she turned in the department store mirror and asked if the color made her look bold. It did, but that night it made her look like a stranger. She didn't know I watched her through the window, her expression charged with excitement that wasn't meant for me. The car headlights washed over her face, revealing an anticipation I hadn't seen in months, maybe years. I didn't feel anger, not anymore. What I felt was calculation, because the trap was almost ready. But a trap is worthless without a trigger. Claire had been walking into my silence for weeks, one step at a time. She thought she was dancing through freedom, through secrecy, through the thrill of her second life. What she didn't know was that her footsteps led exactly where I needed them to go. That night, I received a call, the stranger. Okay? The same man who had walked into my home weeks earlier, the man who knew details about my life he should have never known, the man whose voice seemed to carry the weight of things I wasn't ready to understand. You're patient, he said. No greeting, no introduction, just those two words spoken like a verdict. What do you want? I asked. You're building something, he replied. I admire that. I didn't confirm it. I didn't deny it, he continued anyway. Most men in your position panic, they confront, they lash out. They destroy themselves before the truth ever sees daylight. But you're doing the opposite. Like, I'm not interested in your analysis. No, he said. You're interested in closure. Something inside me froze. He'd spoken the one word that had kept me awake night after night, Kalishin. He paused, letting the silence expand, until his voice returned in a lower, heavier tone. "Okay, she's going to give you the trigger you're waiting for." My grip tightened on the phone. "What do you mean?" "You'll see," he said. "The trap is already built. All that's left is to let her step where she was always going to fall." The line went dead. I sat there for a long time, letting the silence settle around me like dust. Part of me wanted to dismiss the call as the ramblings of a man who enjoyed meddling in other people's pain. But the larger part, the part that had begun to trust instinct over emotion, recognized the truth. The stranger wasn't guessing, he knew, and that meant I wasn't the only one watching Claire. Okay, the next morning, the trigger arrived. It came in the form of a single envelope slipped into our mailbox between bills and catalogs. Nothing written on the outside, no return address, no handwriting to identify the sender. Just a plain, ordinary envelope, the kind a person overlooks unless they've been taught to fear the ordinary. And I didn't open it right away. I made coffee, I sat on the porch, I watched the neighborhood wake up. Only once the world felt quiet did I slit the envelope open. Inside was a single photograph, Claire, not alone. She stood beside a man I'd never seen before, tall, confident, smiling at her with a familiarity that made my stomach tighten. Claire looked at him the way a woman looks at the future she believes she deserves. A future that didn't include me. The timestamp in the corner gave me more than a date. It gave me a location, it gave me context, it gave me intent. The photograph wasn't new. It wasn't from last night, it wasn't from last week, it was from months ago. Months before Claire started acting distant, months before the stranger came into my home. Months before I ever sensed something was wrong. My marriage hadn't started breaking recently. Kanatsad Pertsev to spi. It had broken long before I even noticed the first crack. And suddenly everything made sense. The guilt, the secrecy, the stranger's warnings. My trap hadn't been built in response to her betrayal. It had been built atop the ruins of a betrayal that began long before I ever thought to guard myself. But this photograph, this was leverage, and leverage is the heart of any true trap. When Claire came home that evening, I was sitting in the kitchen, calm, neutral, unshakable. She walked in with that same careful smile, the one she thought could plaster over months of deceit. "How was your day?" she asked. I nodded gently. "When Kwamsan Tenaper what chamsam?" she asked. How nodded gently. "Quiet." She relaxed, a relaxation rooted in the belief that I was harmless. That belief was the final piece I needed, because she was about to step into the center of the trap, willingly, unknowingly, inevitably. And the beauty of a perfect trap is simple. The prey never realizes it's trapped until it looks down and sees the jaws already closed. There's a moment in every betrayal where something inside you dies quietly. It doesn't scream, it doesn't collapse. It doesn't shatter like the movies show, it simply stops. A breath you didn't realize you were holding slips out of your chest, and the part of you that once believed in love, believed in trust, believed in the promises of another person, falls silent forever. For me, that moment came on a morning so deceptively calm that the world felt staged. As if life itself stepped aside to let the truth walk through the door. The sun was soft. The air tasted like nothing. The house was still, so still it felt like it was waiting with me. Claire was in the shower, her phone was on the nightstand, and everything was about to change. Not because I touched it, not because I opened anything, not because I crossed a boundary, but because boundaries only exist between people who still share a life. And that morning, I realized we didn't share. And that morning, I realized we didn't share anything anymore. Not a future, not trust, not even the same reality. We were two actors trapped in the same play, speaking lines neither of us believed. And she was showering for someone else. She was dressing for someone else. She was living for someone else. And I was done pretending I didn't see it. The night before had pushed me past the line I'd been circling for weeks. Claire came home late again, later than she'd intended, later than she'd planned, even her lies could explain. When she stepped into the house, her hair was tasseled in a way that had nothing to do with the wind, and the faintest hint of cologne, not mine, hung around her like a confession. She avoided my eyes. She set her bag down quietly, too quietly, then she offered me a smile. A small, brittle thing, the kind of smile you give to a stranger you hope won't ask questions. It didn't hurt, not this time. Pain requires hope, and I had run out of that long ago. Instead, I watched her move through the house, every step rehearsed, every gesture polished, every expression calculated. She thought she was fooling me. She thought she was still in control. But when she disappeared upstairs, humming under her breath a little tune she used to sing for me, I realized something chilling. No, yeah, hiss. I didn't feel anger. I didn't feel sadness. I didn't feel betrayed. I felt nothing, and nothing is the most dangerous feeling of all. The next morning began with a silence that felt deeper than the house had ever known. Claire's phone rested on the nightstand, screen down, case cracked at the edge, a small imperfection in a meticulously crafted lie. She never left it unattended, not anymore, not since the guilt started sticking to her skin. But that morning she had, because she was tired, because she was careless, because she believed I was still asleep. But I wasn't. And I sat at the edge of the bed, staring at the wall, letting the quiet wash through me like anesthesia. For the first time in our marriage, I wasn't thinking about her. I wasn't wondering who she was texting. I wasn't wondering where she had been. I was wondering who I had become. A man waiting for answers from someone who stopped giving them years ago. A man apologizing for storms he didn't create. A man holding up the weight of a marriage built on foundations someone else had already walked away from. The realization was simple, sharp, merciless. I wasn't her husband anymore. I had just been too loyal to notice. When she stepped out of the shower, steam drifting behind her, she didn't see me right away. She was humming again, that same tune, that same softness, that same lie wearing her voice. She towel-dried her hair and picked up her phone. Her thumb tapped, the screen unlocked. And her entire body froze, not because she saw a message, not because she saw something incriminating, but because she saw the time she had forgotten to send him a good morning message. Her breathing stuttered. Her shoulders tensed. Her eyes darted toward the bathroom door, as if debating whether to go back inside to text him from behind locked walls. Not a single part of her behavior belonged to a wife thinking about her husband. And that was the moment everything ended for me, not because she was cheating, but because she no longer saw me at all. I could have been a ghost in the room, a stranger, a memory. She had already left, her body just hadn't moved out yet. And the truth hit me with a clarity so sharp it almost felt clean. She wasn't mine. She hadn't been mine in a long time, and she never would be again. And the word wife no longer fit her. It clung to her like a borrowed coat, worn by someone who didn't deserve its warmth. And once that understanding settled in, I felt an unexpected calm settle into my bones, steady, cold, resolute. The calm of a man who had nothing left to lose, the calm of a man ready for what came next. And because once you stop calling someone your wife, you stop protecting them like one. The rest of the day played out with a surreal kind of slowness. Claire floated through the house with the nervous grace of someone trying to keep two lives from colliding. She avoided my eyes more than usual. She held her phone close. She laughed under her breath at messages I wasn't meant to see. She lingered by the mirror too long, studying herself with the vanity of a woman who wanted to be wanted, just not by me. But the strangest part wasn't her behavior. It was mine. For the first time, I didn't track her movements. I didn't count the lies. I didn't analyze her words. I didn't wonder who she was planning to meet. I didn't care. Indifference is the final stage of heartbreak. It's not anger. It's not sadness. It's not forgiveness. It's absence. She had drained too much from me for too long, and I finally noticed the emptiness. That afternoon, I walked past her while she was getting dressed. Her blouse was new. Her perfume was new. Her smile was new. Everything she cared about belonged to someone else. Cavan and Avent Kane. She looked at me only once, briefly, cautiously, measuring my expression as if she expected to see accusation or suspicion or pain. But all she saw was neutrality, and that terrified her. "Are you okay?" she asked, her voice small. She wasn't asking out of concern, she was asking out of fear, fear that I knew, fear that her lies were falling apart, fear that the world she had built with someone else was no longer as protected as she believed. "Okay, yes," I said simply, just one word, flat, even unshakable. It was the first truth I had spoken to her in months. She left the house not long after, stumbling through her goodbye like a student reciting lines she didn't understand. I'll be home late long meeting, don't wait up. And then she was gone. The door closed behind her with a softness that felt rehearsed, careful, guilty. A door between two worlds, the one we pretended existed and the one she escaped to every chance she got. For the first time, I didn't follow her with my thoughts. For the first time, I didn't feel a pit open in my stomach. For the first time, I didn't imagine what she was doing, who she was with, what lies she'd tell when she returned. I just sat in the living room, listening to the ticking of the clock, and allowed myself to be honest. She wasn't my wife. She was simply a woman I used to love, and I was done burying myself beneath the rubble of her choices. It wasn't a dramatic realization. It wasn't accompanied by tears or shaking hands. It was quiet, balanced, inevitable. The day I stopped calling her my wife wasn't the day she betrayed me. It was the day I stopped betraying myself. Night fell slowly, spilling across the house like dark ink. Claire's absence used to feel like a wound. Now it felt like space, open, vast, breathable. I made dinner for one. I sat at the table alone. I looked at the empty chair across from me and felt nothing. For years, I had imagined our late-night conversations, our future, our aging together. Now all I saw was a hollow place where promises used to live. Somewhere out there, Claire was lying again, lying with her smile, lying with her body, lying with her heartbeat. And for the first time, it didn't matter. Because she was lying to someone who would never know the truth about her. Like someone who thought he was stealing her from me. Someone who had no idea what kind of woman he was inheriting. He wasn't stealing anything. He was being handed a problem, a disaster, a performance. A woman who didn't know how to keep promises, even when she whispered them, let him take her. Park Champrakan, let him believe her, let him build his life on her lies. My revenge didn't need to target him. He was already cursed. My revenge was aimed at something bigger, her truth, her facade. Her carefully crafted image of innocence, her reputation built on polished smiles and practiced sweetness. I wasn't going to destroy her with violence. I wasn't going to expose her with messy confrontations. I was going to let her fall into a trap she built with her own hands. And the first step of that process was removing the title she no longer deserved. Wife, not anymore. Not ever again. She came home past midnight. I heard her key in the lock. I heard her soft footsteps. I heard the whisper of her blouse as she slipped off her shoes and tiptoed down the hall, thinking I was asleep. Every part of her screamed guilt, the way she breathed through her mouth, the way she paused to check the hallway, the way her hand shook on the railing. But guilt wasn't my concern anymore. She froze when she saw the light under the living room door. Her frozen like a thief caught mid-step. She pushed the door open slowly. Her eyes scanned the room. And then she saw me sitting there, calm and still. Unmoved, her voice trembled. You're still up? Still up? I looked at her, really looked at her smudged lipstick, at her flushed cheeks. At the faint mark on her collarbone, a stranger stood in front of me wearing my wife's face. And in the softest, steadiest voice I had left in me, I said the words I'd been holding all day. Oh, I know who you are now. She flinched, her entire body flinched, like she'd been slapped by the truth. And that was the moment the marriage finally died, quietly, completely, irreversibly, not because she cheated, but because I stopped letting her call herself mine. The storm comes in many forms. Sometimes it roars with wind and rain. Sometimes it crashes in shouts and glass breaking and doors slamming. But the fiercest storms are invisible. They move through your life quietly, reshaping everything without warning, leaving only silence in their wake. By the time Claire realized the storm had arrived, it was too late, and she had built her world on lies, careful steps, stolen glances, whispered secrets. Every word she spoke, every plan she made, every touch she shared with someone else had been meticulously designed to keep herself safe, comfortable, untouchable. And I had let her believe she was untouchable for months, months of observation, months of patience, months of letting her confidence swell like a balloon ready to burst, and it did. The morning began with the letters. I hadn't sent a single one. I hadn't even touched a pen. But the first envelope arrived just as the sun burned the night away. No handwriting, no address, no signature. Inside photographs, dozens of them, Claire standing with him, laughing at a joke I couldn't hear. Claire leaving a hotel, her face a mask of pleasure she thought she was hiding. Claire in her office, smiling at a text I would never receive. Each photograph was a confession, a monument to her duplicity, and she had no idea who had sent them, or that the real story they were telling was only half the truth. Because the trap she walked into didn't rely on proof. It relied on her own fear, her own guilt, and her own inability to see the hand that guided her. Okay? I didn't need to confront her, I didn't need to yell, I didn't need to threaten, all I needed was silence. Hours passed. She paced the house, her steps careful, precise, trying to map out who could have exposed her, what she had left hidden, what evidence she had underestimated. Her breath came shallow, her hands trembled. Her eyes darted constantly to the living room, to the hallway, to the doors she had locked and unlocked a dozen times already. And I watched, I drank my coffee and measured sips, I pretended to read the newspaper. But I was listening to everything, the shallow rhythm of her panic, the subtle hitch in her movements, the way she paused mid-step as if expecting the walls to speak. And the walls did speak, though not to her, they spoke to me. Every lie she whispered, every text she hid, every secret rendezvous became part of a story I was writing in silence. A story she would star in without realizing it. By midday, the storm had grown heavy. The envelope trick was only the beginning. I had prepared for months. Every missed call, every discrepancy in her schedule, every small gesture of avoidance, every hidden corner of our house had been mapped. I had rehearsed my part of the trap like a conductor practicing a symphony of destruction. She didn't know it yet, but the entire day was choreographed around her. When she stepped into the kitchen for lunch, I was already sitting there. The table had not been set for two, only one plate, one cup, one chair. She froze. Cam. Her eyes flicked to the empty chair, her lips parted, then closed. She didn't trust herself to speak. I didn't look at her, I didn't invite her to sit, I didn't acknowledge her presence, I simply continued eating. Silence is heavier than confrontation, it crushes faster than anger, it reaches places that words cannot touch. And Claire felt it, her mind raced, her pulse hammered. She could not move, could not decide, could not speak. And that was the moment the storm broke. The first message arrived on her phone just as she finally dared to touch it. It wasn't mine. It wasn't from the stranger who had warned me months before. It was from someone she thought she had deceived perfectly, someone whose life she had believed untangled from hers. The message was simple. We know everything, every lie, every touch, every night, every name you whispered to him. It's all coming out, Nochev, out now. She dropped the phone, her hands shook violently. Her eyes widened as her mind raced through possibilities, but possibilities were irrelevant. The trap didn't need her to think rationally. The trap only needed her to be afraid. Fear sharpens mistakes. Nakatra. Mr. Kicks break the carefully constructed illusion of control, and Claire made a dozen mistakes in the next hour alone. By late afternoon, I set the next part of the trap into motion. The calendar she had falsified, the schedules she had lied about, the restaurants she had claimed were business meetings, all of it was cross-referenced, duplicated, and prepared for the final reveal. Every person she had involved in her lies, friends, colleagues, even strangers she thought would protect her, received subtle nudges, messages, phone calls, photographs, hints, not enough to accuse directly, but enough to create doubt, enough to unravel trust. She began receiving texts and calls she could not explain, people asked questions she could not answer. Emails arrived with attachments she could not deny. Every step she had taken to shield herself became a window into her own guilt. By now she was pacing. Her phone in hand, every shadow in the house a threat, every sound a warning. Her panic was exquisite. Not for me, not for revenge, but for herself. And the brilliance of the trap was this. I was not the predator anymore. Her fear became her own predator. She was unraveling herself piece by piece, thread by thread. Evening fell and the storm outside mirrored the one inside. Clouds heavy and gray, rain thrumming against the windows, wind rattling the panes, the perfect backdrop for the culmination of everything I had built. Claire didn't notice. She never noticed storms unless they hit her directly. I prepared the final act. It was elegant. It was simple. It was unstoppable. She had left a trail, months of meticulous breadcrumbs to someone she thought was outside her life. Someone who would see her only in flashes, in photographs, in glimpses, someone she underestimated. I set those breadcrumbs in the open, not for her, not for me, but for everyone else. By nightfall, it all converged, the neighbors she had charmed, the colleagues she had fooled, friends she had whispered secrets to, the strangers she had met for lunches she claimed were business. Everyone saw her reflected as she truly was. The moment she realized what had happened, she froze. She could not undo the exposure. She could not retract the proof. She could not control the narrative she thought she had written. The storm had arrived, and she was standing in the eye of it. I did not speak. I did not gloat. I did not laugh. I simply sat in the living room, quiet, unmoving, a witness to the unraveling of a life that once shared mine. The silence after the storm was deafening. Claire's body shook. Her eyes welled. Her voice broke. And yet no words formed. She was alone in her fear, alone in her exposure, alone in her truth. And I finally understood the weight of a storm delivered with precision. Weeks past, Claire left the house. She packed her things silently, as if she had been practicing for months. No confrontation, no threats, no apologies. She left behind a note, brief and trembling. I underestimated you, nothing else, no excuses, no explanations, no plea for forgiveness. And that was enough, because I didn't need anything else. I had what I wanted long before she even realized it: closure. The house, once heavy with deception, was empty. The air, once tainted with lies, was clean. The silence, once unbearable, was mine. And in that silence I understood the most terrifying, exhilarating truth about revenge, and it does not always arrive with noise. It does not always demand chaos. It does not always scream justice. Sometimes revenge is quiet, still, perfect. And it waits until the storm has passed, until the wind stops rattling the windows, until the victim is finally alone, to speak in a voice louder than anything anger or tears could ever produce. Mine spoke in silence, and in that silence I was free.